I would like to start with this framework, and I think it's very important when we assess the impact of any technology, not just AI, on the economy. The first step is invention. So, and we'll focus on where the invention style is going. This tends to be the most, I would say, romantic session, a part of this, right? That you are doing cutting-edge AI models, you are increasing the number of flops, the floating point operations per second that you use by millions or billions. But this by itself has very limited impact on the economy. The second step is innovation. So you develop a very core fundamental technology, and then you need to find solutions which make sense, which start to solve economic problems. And the third, and a very critical phase, is diffusion. How deeply is this penetrating? So take an example. Development of the transistor happened sometime in the 1940s. And for the next, even till the next 10, 15 years, most of the computers were still using vacuum tubes. It was only starting in the late 60s that integrated chips started becoming really powerful and the Moore's law compounding started. So invention and innovation were separated by almost a decade and a half, 2 decades. And it is only now with like these smartphones being way more powerful than the first super minis that I worked on in the early 90s, that really the impact of the transistor is starting to get felt. So same with chemicals. So you do a lot of chemical R&D, and what you see is that eventually glue or coating is developed, and then you see the Fevicol 5 rupee pack, and it starts to affect large technologies. In fact, you will see the economic impact of that can be quite significant. There are several types of innovations. So there are what you call leading sector innovations. So these are very narrow innovations, and there are general purpose technologies. So GPT, so AI is a GPT. What you can see is that the impact time frame for general purpose technologies is actually quite prolonged. So say, for example, the development of crude oil, or not development, the discovery of crude oil and the various uses of that, you will see that in the 1850s and 60s, people started to find that it could be used for kerosene. Then its cycle was kind of waning off, and then automobiles came, and then new uses for crude oil started to get developed. So when you think about really broad-based general-purpose technologies, their economic impact is actually felt with a significant gap. And the breadth of impact is, of course, very wide. So you will see a very wide range of sectors that get affected or disrupted because of this. This is, for those of you who work in the tech sector, this is normal. For those of you who are not, this is the Gartner hype cycle. Over time, every single product goes through this curve. So you have the initial phase where what you see is, you have what you call the innovation trigger. Then you have expectations start rising very rapidly. This is when venture capitalists raise a lot of capital. They deploy a lot of capital. All kinds of, pie-in-the-sky ventures get funded. And then you see there is a peak of expectations, and then you see the trough of disillusionment. That then people say, oh, you know what? Like what is being discussed now, right? That if you're already investing $150 billion into AI, it should be generating at least $600 billion of revenue. Now, where is the $600 billion of revenue? So one very famous VC has already put out those questions. So we are going to see, and frankly, my own BTech project many decades back was in artificial intelligence. And so we have seen periodic troughs and peaks. And so you're likely to see this happen again for many of these products. And then you see the slope of enlightenment. Then you eventually see progress coming through. Now, the way to read this is one, I don't have to read all the fine print there. There are many technologies in AI. It is not just one technology. Some, as you can see from the empty circles, are very mature. So computer vision is very mature. So I believe this morning that anecdote of welders or in welding using AI tools to figure out welding is proper or not is based on computer vision. Believe it or not, I worked on computer vision nearly 30 years back. And so this is a very mature technology. So it is like 2 years from reaching peak productivity. But then you see the triangles. These are on the other extreme, the orange triangles. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, Elon Musk would have us believe it's happening in 5 years. Some people think it is 25 to 30 years away. Gartner, whose hype cycle I've used, is kind of the consensus. In financial markets, we use Bloomberg consensus. It's somewhat like the technology consensus. And what you see is that they think it is more than 10 years away. So there are various parts of this AI, which are the solution development, the innovation part, which is at very different phases of development. But it is reasonable to think that some of these solutions are going to start impacting us right now. The next phase is diffusion. So how widely, how quickly can we start using it? So what you see on the left is so this is a study done by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. They looked at job openings and requirements. So one way of finding out how a certain technology is diffusing is how many job openings demand knowledge of those. So what you see is that the diffusion of smart devices in job openings was very rapid. So from 0% in 2007, it was nearly at 100% in 2017. So within a decade, having knowledge of smart devices or familiarity with them was a necessary condition. On the other hand, if you see the right-hand side chart, that is on cloud computing. So what you see is that from 2007 to 2019, the movement is only about 50%. Despite all the productivity growth promises that AI brings, and I'm not trying to dish them, the fact is that most surveys suggest that companies are exploring ideas. So when I think about my own research team in Axis Capital, we are starting to use. So we have a text-to-voice product that will start using AI, generative AI, but it's a very small part of our distribution process. So companies are only just about starting to explore how well you can use AI. So the Copilot is easy to get. For those of you who haven't used it, it's actually quite powerful if you're writing reports or summarizing them. The team's note summaries are very powerful. But in terms of actual productivity drivers, these are still very, very minor. So the adoption of some of these tools, I think, is more likely to be more like what happened with the PC. So the PC, as you can see, started in the 1980s. By 1985, we had about 10 to 30% penetration, more in offices than at home. And then we saw, over the next 3 decades, a slow increase. So when you think about the productivity growth that any technology brings about, so like for AI, there will be improvements in the productivity of individuals. So when I think about myself as a research analyst, I can retrieve information faster. I can write much better, much faster. I can show a chart to Copilot, and it will generate text for me. I mean, I don't want to use that text. Very often it's wrong, but that's a good starting point. And then I can distribute much faster. But there is also the pace of diffusion. I mean, how many of the research analysts on the street are going to be using that? So all of this will determine how well AI is, how much of an impact AI will have on economic productivity. So there's a very famous paper. Many people think it's wrong, but at this stage, I think it's perfectly fine to have open debates. The gentleman who got the Nobel Prize, Daron Acemoglu, so he says that the impact on the economy will come through automation, where AI replaces labor. There is task complementarity, so AI will help segments. There is deeper automation, so some of the automated tasks will become really more efficient. And of course, there will be new tasks, and we'll explore some of this. But again, to summarize it, using my own example, there are certain types of reports which AI can generate. So for example, if we cover 300 stocks in Axis Capital, writing a summary which is required for a certain type of client who's only interested in certain sectors, currently one person is doing it, it can get done by AI. It is, as I said, helping me and my team work faster, generate charts faster, find information faster. So all of those things are starting to happen very well. Some of this is generational. My daughter is much faster, 8-year-old is much faster with ChatGPT when she's doing her homework. At this stage, I'm not discouraging her from plagiarism because it's a skill to learn ChatGPT, but she is much more natural with it than I am. And I think as she grows older, as with most kids in her generation, I think she will be much more natural. And that's another important lever to keep in mind that I can see most of us here are not really young. So a lot of habit change, how we engage with technology is something that is also a generational shift. So that is another reason why diffusion tends to be quite slow. So let's see where the trends are. And so on the innovation side, meaning how fast computing is changing, so what we've done here is we've plotted, this is, of course, from Epoch. On the y-axis is the training compute, the floating point operations per second, the flops. On the x-axis is, of course, the years, the publication date. What we have taken is the frontier models. So we have not taken a line of best fit on all the dots. We've only taken the dots for the top of the class in any given year. And what you can see is that the slope is already slowing. Now, it is slowing very gradually. So in the first decade, it was at about 6.7 times a year. It is now slowed to 4.2 times a year. I mean, it's quite incredible that the number of operations that required to train a model are growing at 4.2 times a year. But this is already starting to slow. And some of the new models that are coming up in terms of feature richness are already starting to disappoint. So this is not the end of the world, meaning that we are kind of at the peak of expectations. We will see a period where digestion happens, where new innovation, new technologies, business adoption, diffusion picks up. But it is important to observe that this is starting to slow down. There are harder constraints, which I think we may not hit. So there are constraints on power, right? So if you think about most of, or a large part of what we count today as AI is convolutional neural networks. Neural networks are trying to ape the human brain. So just like the nice rubbery I just have, and which is firing my brain right now, the same neural network will be powered by nuclear power in a data center. We are starting to now, so you will see that Microsoft recently bought a defunct nuclear power plant. Companies are realizing that you need to have power plants very close to data centers, and that power itself could become a constraint. And the cost, because the cost of compute will then get dependent on what is the cost of the electricity you are using. So there are thresholds which you can see, to the power 29, to e to the power 29, or 10 to the power 29 flops. That is where the threshold in 2030 could be in terms of just the power availability. You need a lot of chip production. Now, these are all very, I would say, reasonable projections, though, of course, the margin of possibility is much wider in the sense that today, a lot of the chip design can be done using AI. So as over a period of time, what we have seen is that the cost of designing a chip has been rising very rapidly because every transistor that you put requires a human to kind of place it. And therefore, chips today cost several $100 million to design. AI is now starting to help write that code which designs the chip. So the process of chip design itself is becoming more efficient. But the process of chip manufacturing may not become that efficient. So will there be a constraint on how many transistors we can produce? And then, of course, there is a data scarcity because all of these engines require a lot of data. The constraint very often can be, how much of data is available which can be used for training. Now this, as things get digitized, is rising exponentially, but in terms of the impact it can have on a training model is, of course, also constrained. So these are, and then there is a latency, which, of course, is the highest. But so it's not that AI has unlimited power. So unless we can use the floating point operations per second very efficiently, the impact on the economy may not be that good. So that's on the hard innovation side. Invention side. On the innovation side, you can see GitHub. For those of you who don't know, this is the repository for code. So all programmers keep their code here. They collaborate. Some of the code is made public. So what you see is that the number of AI models, the code segments that are using AI has risen by 98% in the last year. So clearly, more and more solutions are being developed. What is very important to see is that some of these are, I would say, enablers. Instead of solving problems, they're enabling more code to be written. So the impact is actually almost exponential. And therefore, the process of finding solutions, business solutions, software solutions that solve economic problems is just about taking off. So there is, so while on the invention side, we may be starting to hit or at least conceive limits which we need to start addressing, like power and chip production and all of that, on the innovation side, in trying to solve business problems, things are actually just about starting to take off. In terms of the impact, so there's a whole range of estimates at this stage. I think we have to be aware that this range exists. So you can see Korinek and Su, when they say if AGI is achieved in 5 years, the impact on overall productivity and economic impact could be 10% a year, which I think is really, really the upper end. I don't think that is very likely. You can see the Nobel laureate Akemoglu thinks that it should be 0.07% to 0.06 to 0.07%. So that's the range of gains that he's talking about. He is perhaps the most pessimistic of the lot in terms of the impact. Maybe the real impact, as we all see in economics, could be somewhere in the middle. So we will see 1.5%. So that is the kind of range that when the PC was introduced, it has had over the last 15, 20 years. So 1.5% a year impact on economic growth is a reasonable one to look for. Now let me focus on the importance of diffusion. This is a chart, which is a very old one, 2019, from iSpirit. You can see on the x-axis is GDP per capita. On the y-axis is the percentage of adults with a bank account. And every dot is a country. So you can see how much of an outlier India is. So we did not do any of the inventions here. We did not invent the smartphone, or we didn't invent the transistor. We did do Aadhaar, but Aadhaar, which I have the privilege of heading now, but even Aadhaar basic technologies were all developed outside. But we did drive diffusion. So we shortened the time frame by nearly 46 years. So if you had just done a line of best fit, and if we had depended on GDP grow or per capita GDP to grow for financial inclusion to reach a certain level, it would have taken us more than 40 years more than it did. And I think this is where the role or the importance of diffusion. So we used publicly available technology. We just created smart solutions, and then using government machinery, pushed it really hard and really deep. And I think that's where the impact can be felt. We have some very hard problems to solve, like on healthcare and education. Just like in financial inclusion, there is a very, very vexed problem of unit costs, because it costs so much to do branch banking, you could only provide it to a small number of people. And because a very large number of people could not afford that, their productivity didn't grow. They couldn't process payments. They couldn't do a lot of things. The moment you bring down unit costs, everything starts to become possible. And we are seeing some of the innovations that L&T Finance is driving are all based on this massive amount of data and financial inclusion. In healthcare as well, you can see the whole list of things in traditional healthcare, like the patient outcomes, the cost of scanning through an X-ray, the cost of scanning through a set of slides on histopathology, the use of historic data to find out best outcomes. All of that, when done in a traditional way, is very expensive, because you are relying on the cost per person of of a highly trained doctor. But the moment you start using technology, some of these can be brought down. And I think on both education and healthcare, there is a significant opportunity for us, including in India and in large parts of the world, to bring down unit costs and therefore significantly drive productivity. So you can see on the right, these are just estimates from the National Library of Medicine, how the treatment time per hour can be brought down dramatically. And as you see more and more reduction in the treatment time itself and the accuracy, the cost of healthcare, the cost of education can actually be brought down. I'll spend, I know I'm over time, I'll take 2 more minutes. So there is a lot of pessimism on job losses. And you can see that even, Korinek and Sue, what you see on the right is that if you get AGI, so if you don't get AGI, you see a lot of product output growth, which is the left-hand side chart, and the wages keep growing. The moment you get artificial general intelligence, you see the parabolic curves down, right? So then the need for humans, especially people like me, who rely only on brain work to survive, there will be question marks. I'm not going to the extent of what apparently Kunal told you this morning, that you'll become credit risk. I'm hoping I won't be a credit risk, but the point is that this can be quite disruptive. But every time in the past, you see we have given quotes. Leontief said that computers will kill the economy, drive out labor. Didn't happen, right? So if you read about the history of the Morgans, Jack Morgan, who was the son of John Pierpont Morgan, he had a house in London where there was one person whose job was to tweak the clocks, right? So, or rather, sort of wind up the clocks. New types of jobs come, and what I must say is a 150-year trend. You see the left-hand side chart is the number of hours worked per month per week in the Western world. For 150 years, 170 years, this has been falling. And I think so what John Maynard Keynes had said in 1930 when he wrote about the economic prospects for our grandchildren, he said that in 2030, the number of work hours will fall to 15 hours. That you'll have to work 15 hours a week. There's no need for us to work 100 hours a week. And therefore, I think if we manage the distribution of the effort, the work, I think the concerns on labor loss and inequality will drop. Secondly, what you see on the right is that commercialized leisure goes up. So when most of us were growing up, we would spend our spare time in parks. Today, we pay money for that. Not going to parks. No one goes to parks these days. We watch movies. We play video games. So we travel. We see the world. And so commercialized leisure then starts to take off. So it is wrong to think that all of this automation, so on one thing I'm reasonably sure of is that the pessimism on job losses and the disruption, social disruption, is something that we should take with a pinch of salt. With that, I know I'm 3 minutes over time. I'll stop, and I believe there's a panel discussion where we can do questions. Thank you.